Hey, this is Sam from Vim. So let's go over our platform. For a lot of you, it seems like Power BI is a new thing. So we can look at a couple things about Power BI. First off, it's one of the most important product from Microsoft, the one where they're putting a lot of effort, and it's really reached a level of maturity that is quite high, making it very easy for people to do business intelligence. And the main thing about Power BI is that it connects to many different sources of information. It can connect to a database, to Excel, to a CSV file. It can connect to the internet. It can connect to pretty any information you have anywhere. So it's really good for amalgamating all of this information together. The other thing that is very special about Power BI is its ability to share dynamic reports online. So this is a dynamic report that we've done with Power BI. And as you can see, I don't need to install anything. I can share this as a link, and I can open this on my tablet or laptop or cell phone, pretty much anywhere that I need to. And the other thing is all of this data is coming from everywhere, and usually the data is not perfect, right? It may be coming in a way, and it needs to be cleaned, and it needs to be transformed so that it can be useful. So Power BI or Power Query is really good at taking this data. So whether it's an Excel file that needs to be cleaned up, it goes through a pipeline that cleans the data so that at the end, Power BI can use that data and you don't have to do the transformation anytime because you've automated it. And the other thing about Power BI is how easy it is to modify things. You kind of become a software developer without having to learn programming. So in the BIM world, it's kind of like the top power without having to learn programming, right? You don't have to pray to Autodesk. You just drag and drop the things. And as you learn this, you kind of create your own software for your exact needs and basically automate your job. So not all of it, but the most boring parts, right? And also it's much easier for clients to navigate something like this. Okay. So where does Vim fit into this process? I've been talking about Power BI, but we care about Revit buildings and IFC buildings. So what have we done? What's our point here, right? So there's three things that we've done that are quite important. The first one is the most complicated part, and it's a bit like the hidden gem of our product, I would say. It's the least understood by Revit folks, but it's the most appreciated by data analysts. And you'll realize that when you start Power BI, you need to do the most complicated thing first, and that's called data modeling. This is what happens here in Power Query or the Transform Data button. So to get all of that data from Revit properly clean and usable, you need to do data modeling. And as a Revit person, we are not data analysts, right? So there's very few of us that understand the science of databases and data. So we did it so that you don't have to do it. And what that means is the data comes in properly. It has a good name. It is, if you don't need to see it, it's going to be hidden. We're using folders. It's much like the equivalent of a good BIM philosophy, a good BIM office standard, a good BIM execution plan, templates, families. It's kind of like the hardest work that you have to do at the beginning, so that everybody else that's not, that has a level of comfort that's medium has an easy time. They don't have to think about the BIM philosophy and the BIM standards. They just read it and they use it, and it's intuitive and it helps everyone. So we did the hardest work that has to be done at the beginning so that you don't have to do or think about it. And this is what it looks like in terms of data science. So maybe very mysterious to you, but as you start learning Power BI, you can start appreciating all of this hard work that's been done for you. The second thing is our 3D viewer. So the 3D viewer is very important. It's quite performant. It can handle large buildings, and it's always getting new features. So you can take dimensions. You can have sections in there. Like look at a section tool is quite performant. And this is not a small model. This is quite a complex model. And we're always adding new features, making sure that it can run bigger and bigger buildings. And that way, you can have your large projects in there with no problems. And then, of course, it's going to filter whatever you're selecting in here. The third thing is really these templates. So these templates right now are really focusing on BIM auditing. And you can take these templates and use them as is, or you can modify them for your own exact needs. As you start learning Power BI and looking at our training materials, and as we keep developing more and more templates, you can take them, learn how to use the data model, and create things that are for your exact needs. If you want to add a button, if you don't care about these things, you can change it. You can modify it as you wish, and then you can publish it online, so that other people can have a look at it. So, or connect to your own data that you care about. So, let's look at some use cases, right? Here I'm looking at a parameter audit, and it's going to, there's a couple options. So I can look at all the parameters. In this case, I'm looking at the parameters that are partially filled. So they're not 100% and they're not 0%. That would be the filled and the empty. And let's try to find a parameter that's interesting. Perhaps, well, this is a good one, right? So we see that it is 51% filled out. And so it's not fully filled out, right? And it's present in 25,000 elements, and it's only filled in 12,000 elements. There's only 10 distinct values, and this is the number of families and types of objects that it's in. And we see that it's a shared parameter for the project with a shared GUID for a shared parameter. So when we select this parameter down here, we see all of the categories that it is present in. We see, for example, this parameter is never filled for ceilings, right? So we can ask ourselves, should we remove this parameter from ceilings, or should we fill it out in the ceilings perfectly? And same thing for lighting fixtures, same thing for ramps, for roofs, and, you know, pretty low adoption rate for the stairs. So let's look, we also see all of the values that are in here. And actually right away, when we look at the values, it's a bit weird. Sometimes we're using all caps, all capital letters for the value, sometimes not. So the quality of the data seems a bit questionable. It seems bad, to be honest. And let's click here, right? So generic models. Actually, one second. So let's go back here. We wanted to look at generic models, or is this the same thing? There we go. Okay. So generic models are filled at 56%, and there's 4 distinct values. So let's open this up. Now we see all of these families. They don't have the data. The drinking fountain has the data for some reason. It seems to always be support is the value. And really, so the parameter is not properly filled, and we see which families have it or don't have it. So at this point, we can decide to remove it from some families or tell the team, go fill out the parameters, do your job. And this can tell us, we can say, you're not allowed to have partially filled parameter. It's either 100% or we're going to get rid of this parameter for the quality of the data. And you can really decide which parameter you care about. You can select the exact parameters that you care about or don't. And through Power BI, you could also make an Excel list of all the parameters that are mandatory and plug it in there. And it would reduce that list to only the mandatory parameters. So then you see only the things that you care about. So this is both a product and a workflow. It's a little bit like Revit, right? You don't just buy Revit and everybody can use it. Revit allows you to do your own customized workflows to fill your own needs, but you have to learn how to use it, and then you can fulfill your own needs and customize it for your own purposes. Okay, let's look at another much simpler report that in this case looks at warnings. So everybody knows what a warning is, but the Revit user interface is terrible. It's like they did a competition for the worst possible user interface, and they won that competition a failure. So, you need to open every model and open up the user interface, and then it's not friendly, or they export an Excel sheet and that's also not friendly. So here, this is something we can share with the manager that never wants to open Revit, that doesn't even have Revit on their computer. We can share this with the CEO, with the owner, and they can get an idea of the quality of the health of the model. So they can just click on the critical warnings only and see that there's 665 of them, and that they're mostly in the architecture model. If they want more data, they can drill up and down like this. This is drilling up, a very concept that's very foundational in Power BI. So you drill all the way up, and you can keep drilling down and down and down until at the end you get all the way to the Revit IDs. So we see it here: model, severity, warnings, family, type, instance, etc. Let's drill all the way up again, and we'll do this more manually. So we'll say architecture, high severity problems. Actually, we can unclick this here. So only